Hello everybody. Welcome back to another session on Python programming. Today, we start with a very important topic, that is functions. Functions are not new to us. We have been using functions like length, str, and there are some functions which are part of the class like str.upper. We call them as methods very often. But it's now time for us to design a function. We have been using predefined functions earlier, max, min, all those things that we have used were all predefined functions. Today we plan to create functions of our own. Now the first question that should come to your mind is, why do you want to create a new function? A lot of times it so happens you are required to execute some instructions repeatedly at different places within the same application, or also in different applications. That means you do a task today, same task you have to execute in another application, and so on. Rather than writing that particular code repeatedly in every application, we could design a module which will have that particular function and call that particular piece of code repeatedly in any number of applications where we need that particular functionality. So functions give you an opportunity to create a reusable piece of code. That means I'm going to write a piece of code and I'm going to reuse. A lot of time, people have a misconception that I can reuse that particular piece of code only within the same application. That is not the case. If I define a function, I may not just be in a position to execute those set of instructions. Function is like a small program. It's a code snippet. I cannot just execute that particular piece of code repeatedly within the same program. I can also execute that code within different applications. We have seen modules like sys and modules like string that we saw yesterday. Wherever we import that particular module string, we could call that method substitute, or we could call that method safe substitute. That means that method substitute or safe substitute, which are defined inside a module called a string, is reusable. We could reuse it in different applications, in different programs as well. We do not ever, one golden principle of programming is, do not repeat yourself. If you have done a task today and you want to perform similar kind of operation tomorrow, neither should you spend time copy pasting that particular code and then using it. But a thought may come to your mind, what if I copy that code, paste into this particular program, and if I execute, fine, it will run. But tomorrow, if you have pasted that particular code in 10 different applications and you identify some bug or some improvement, you'll have to search for those 10 different applications and go ahead making changes at all the places. Instead, if you had kept that code inside one module and use that particular code from that module in different application, tomorrow, if you make change at one place, that will get reflected all the 10 applications. So functions form, or rather, when we started with logic, if you remember, we talked about decomposition. That was a fundamental pillar of the programming concepts, decomposition, breaking a bigger problem into several small problems. So functions give you a first opportunity to decompose a code. If there is a task that involves several subtasks, so you could write small programs for each of that subtask. So that if that subtask has to be carried out in some other application, you need not write it all over again. You could use the same code. So use of function makes your program more compact. Use of functions improve reliability of your program. Now you may be wondering, how come reliability gets improved by use of function? Let's take an example. Piyusha writes a code, a small piece of code function, and she uses in her application. And she's very sure, and she has experienced that that particular piece of code works correctly. She has been using it for a period of, say, last 6 months. Tomorrow, if it so happens that Viraj wants the same piece of code. He may discuss with Piyusha, write the code all over again. When Viraj writes that particular code all over again, there is a possibility that he may commit mistake. Possibility exists. But instead, if you could have used the code that Piyusha has used earlier, designed and used earlier, it is time tested. That means over a period of time, it is working correctly. So if he uses that particular code, not just his speed of development will improve because he will not waste time writing that code all over again. The reliability of the program will also be higher because the program that was working correctly in Piyusha's code applications, there is no reason why if Viraj uses that code correctly, invokes that particular method correctly, there is no reason why it will not work correctly in Viraj application as well. So functions not just makes the program more compact, because instead of writing this 10 lines code again and again in the program, if you write a function, call that function any number of times. So it makes the program more compact, number of lines of code gets reduced. It also improves the reliability of the program, because I have time tested code which I can reuse in any number of applications. So there are but obvious advantages of going in for functions. Functions were thought to be the prime or the first idea that came to our mind, the language designer's mind, for decomposition, actually, to handle complexity of the program. So if the things are very complex, what do? You divide that particular code into several sub-programs, correct? Handle each of the sub-programs separately. So decomposition was one way that was thought to be a technique to reduce complexity of the program. And this is supported in almost every language. So this concept of function you'll find in every language. Henceforth, whatever language you learn, you'll always find it in every language. All structured programming language provides concept of functions. You may call them by different names. In some languages, we call them as procedures. In some other language, you call them as modules. Python modules are different, but in some other language, you call them as modules. Some call them as sub-program kind of thing. Names can be different, but the concept is same. Where we write a small piece of code that can be reused several times within the same application, or can be reused in different applications. So it's the smallest piece of code. How small? So small that that task cannot be subdivided any further. Means when you design a function, there is a design goal or objective that is there. Objective is to create a piece of code that will perform one task, single task. You should never think about designing a function which this does this and that. Never design such function. Function should have a, we call them a single responsibility. It should carry out only one task. If there are two different tasks, don't write a function which performs two tasks. Rather, design two different functions, one performing one task, another performing the other task. So decompose, break that particular task to such a level that it cannot be decomposed any further. So you may feel, sir, kuch zyada hi functions ban jayenge. Doesn't matter. Let the number of functions be as many as you need. In today's world, with the functional programming coming into prominence, it is said that when you design a function, I'll just share my experience with you. Or rather, I'll share it again when I teach you Java. I was conducting a training program for a company called as Equal Expert. It's a UK-based company. I was teaching Java. And we were developing assignments were quite complex, which we expected the new joinees in the company to complete. I taught them various techniques, various design patterns, and we were expecting them to implement those things. And when the candidates who were being trained by me, when the first review was done, the designs were perfect, everything was okay. But then when I asked the managers who were out there, okay, what do you expect more from these candidates so that I can groom them on to the same? The first thing is, sir, can you teach them decomposition? I said, they have done a fantastic job. But they said, in our company, it is not allowed for us to write a function which is more than 5 lines. That means to that level of decomposition, that means for every task, every small task, they will write a different function. Remember, we have been doing validations for numbers and other things. And in every program we have been, whenever we are accepting numbers, we have to do validation. So write a function for validation. ये digits है क्या? Write a function to check whether it's alphabets है क्या? Write a function to see whether it's punctuation marks hai kya, kind of thing. So decompose it to such an extent that no function grows more than 5 lines. It is not that I was not aware of these kind of coding practices, but I was very skeptical whether companies do implement those practices or not. Are they very adamant on doing that thing or not? But then I saw it for the first hand that companies were insisting that these programmers write such quality of code. Then henceforth, after that, whatever assignments I took, I made sure all my trainees or all my students who were there learning over there, means they were developers actually, but whom I was training. So all those trainees write a code and no function has more than 5 lines. So we have to think about decomposition to that extent. I'm not going to push you that hard because it's very difficult to do that. But then if you look at those pieces of code over a period, they're fantastic. They're easy to test, because testing is one very important property for the software. You should be in a position to test every piece of code. So if you want a very good coverage, you want to test every part of your business logic, better to have different functions. So you can test each of that particular function to understand how does it behave. So it enables you to give better code coverage, better testing, writing test becomes easier, the reusability improves, the readability of the program also improves, but it is a tremendous effort. And so right from the beginning, when we start our journey in the first programming language that you're learning in this particular course, I would always want you to keep that thing in mind. And we are not going to write a function which is hundreds of lines. We'll try and keep the size of the function as small as possible. And wherever possible, design a function. Any task if you come across a task, if there's a subtask, we'll write a function for it. Rather than writing that code inside it. So with that objective, let's see how Python supports this concept of functions. We'll not stop at functions because Python topic functions continues with modules and packages. So this will be in continuation that we'll be discussing. We'll understand what are functions, then we'll understand what are modules, and we understand what is packages. That will cover the major part of our Python course. You may even get a feeling as if we are done with Python, but don't form that opinion. There is more to Python because Python is also an object-oriented language. So after we finish this particular topic of functions, modules, and packages, we'll turn towards object-oriented programming in Python, where we'll learn some advanced concepts as to how to design applications. So design will be different. Right now, what we are learning is structured programming style, which is an idea of late 60s, 1960s की idea है, जो हम लोग अभी तक use कर रहे हैं. After that, we have to learn ideas of 1980s. And after that, we have to learn ideas which are functional style of coding, which are of 2000, recent ideas. So we have to slowly change the way we write the programs. So let's begin with this very important topic, that is functions in Python. Now, when I use the word functions, I give you a brief about what are functions. They are a small piece of code which performs a specific well-defined task, a specific single task. That's a proper definition of functions. But in this particular course, we'll see how to design functions in Python. So if you are designing a function, how do you do it in Python is what we're going to learn. Let's begin with a discussion in functions in Python. Before that, if anybody has a question, please ask.
Sir, we did that call thing while logic development. Is it similar?
Yeah, we did write functions in logic as well. Module, did we? I think we had written. But now we'll have to put those ideas into practice. Function is more about design than an idea. You are already in the process, you are writing nice piece of course. But the design of your program, even the last example that you all solved, that was about, what was that last code that we had written? Mark sheet. The program was working right, but was the design perfect? Even the last assignment, yesterday we discussed 3 different solutions that 3 of you are given. Was the design good? The design was not good. But the good part about that was you know how to express your logic. Now we'll learn how to design the application so that the code is easy to test, easy to maintain, and it should improve reusability. So that is our objective of writing a function. So today we'll learn how to design functions in Python. So the topic for discussion is functions in Python. So this discussion will be more on how to design functions in Python. So why functions, or what is a function? Function is nothing but a name that has been given to a group of statements, which makes your program easy to read, understand, and debug. That's what we discussed right now. So it's a group of statements to which we have given a name. Like a value is being assigned to a variable. So to refer to that value, we use the variable name. To refer to some set of instructions, we'll use a function name. Remember, we have been saying variable names are identifiers. They identify the location where the data has been stored. So likewise, function names are also identifiers. But they identify the location in the memory where data is not stored, where instructions are stored. Because let it be data or instructions, both of them needs to be stored in the memory. Although there are different segments in the memory, I'll teach you memory map also later. There is a segment in the memory where instructions get stored. There is a segment in the memory where data gets stored. But that means if the data is stored at some location, if it has an address, so likewise, if the instructions are stored in the memory, that will also have an address. And memorizing address of something is next to impossible. So why not give a name to that block of memory where that data or instruction has been stored? And if I want to refer to the data, I use the variable name. And if I want to use refer to that set of instructions which have been stored at some location in the memory, I use the function name. So remember, function names are also identifiers. Variable names are also identifiers. While variable names identify the location where some data is being stored, function names identify the location where some instructions are being stored. So instructions are also stored. Any data on which we have to carry out an operation or any instructions that we would like to execute, both needs to be stored in the memory. Now, if you store something in the memory, it will be some location, entry point, address where it will be stored in the memory. And remembering that block of memory by its references, addresses is difficult. So what we do is we create variables. The variables, or we create identifiers. That's the right way. Identifiers will identify some location in the memory. If that identifier identifies a location in the memory where data is stored, we call that identifier as variable. If that identifier identifies the location in the memory where some instruction is stored, we call it as a function. So function names are also identifiers and variable names are also identifiers. Function can make the program smaller by eliminating repetitive code. The same operation, if I had to do 3 times, so that suppose there was 5 lines code, same operation I had to do somewhere later in the program, again in the program. So you may write 15 lines totally, 5, 5, 5, 3 times. Instead, you write a function, call it 3 times. Dividing a long program into function allows you to debug that part, the part one at a time, and then assemble the working into whole. Now let me discuss this. Functions improve the speed of development as well. Say Harsh starts writing a piece of code, and that's quite a lengthy code, 100 lines code he writes. Now it's not just difficult for him to develop, it is also going to be time consuming. But if you had thought over that design properly, we could have broken that particular piece of code into 3 subparts or functions. One Harsh writes, another Ashish writes, third Piyusha writes. And then we could assemble these 3 pieces of code to get the final result. So it's like, remember the work and time problem that we had in our school days. One person working for so many days can complete the task in so many, 10% working can complete. So in organization, this is very important. You're not going to work as an individual. If you're in an organization, you'll work in a team. So it's not like Ashish writes the code and rest all team members observe the code. So we should have an opportunity to divide the task into several parts. So each of the tasks can be assigned to its separate developers. So that can be done by using concept of functions. Well-designed functions are often useful for many programs. So get that thing off your mind कि अगर आपको लगता है कि अगर मैंने function design किया तो I can use it only in my program. That's totally wrong. If you design a function, you can use it in multiple programs. Same function without copy paste. So functions are a reusable piece of program. It's a small piece of code. It should be a small piece of code. They're quite lengthy functions as well. While we are learning Python, and as said, like we are going to write a function which is as small as possible. I saw the code that Python designers have written. Listen to me. जिन्होंने Python create किया है, the repository is available. So we can go to GitHub and see the code for Python itself. And it was a nightmare. Sometimes that is acceptable because the task is so difficult that they cannot think out any other idea. I saw a piece of code in Python where they had written a function and there was an if-else construct. And remember, there were 104 conditions, 104 else, if, else, if, 104. So that's a nightmare. That means you have 104 branches in your program. Agar ye condition true, nahi to ye, nahi to ye. But then there are such kind of some situations where there is no alternative. Okay, so that nightmare you will have to bear. But most of the time, this is not the scenario. Most of the time, if you analyze, you can break your code into several parts. There will be such a rare situations where you will be forced to write such a large code, 200 lines code function. That will be a rare situation. And for the kind of tasks that we are implementing, we'll never come across such complex situation. We'll always have an opportunity to break a program into several small modules. And that is precisely what we'll be doing henceforth. So henceforth, when I give you a task assignment, it is not just about sir ye run kar raha hai, nahi kar raha hai. It's also about the design. Have you designed it properly or not? So you're now going to the next level. Now that you know how to write programs, we'll see how you design the programs as well. Design means how do you organize your code. So functions give you an opportunity to organize the code in different way into small piece of codes, subprograms. It's like dividing a large program to several small programs. They allow you to give a name to a block of statements, allowing you to run the block using specified name anywhere in your program and any number of times. This is known as calling a function. So you call a function. That means there is some piece of code that has been already created and stored in the memory. It has some address. That address has been given a name. And you every time call, that means you transfer your control to the location in the memory where that function is stored, execute those instructions, and then you come back. So you're calling a function. Calling means you're transferring the control to the location where the instructions have been stored. You're executing those instructions and then you're coming back. If I have to just put across diagrammatically, I could do something like this. Say, this is a piece of code that we have. It's a function that we have.
Hello.
This is a piece of function that we have. Okay. This is a piece of function. It has been given some name. Say there's a name like XYZ or something like that. That's the name of the function. And if I had to carry out that operation multiple times, so what I could do, I could call that function XYZ first time. I could call that function probably again. Next time again, XYZ. Next time somewhere later in the program, after a few instructions, so मुझे ये कुछ कर लिया, दोबारा I would like to call, I could again call XYZ. So at different times in the program, if I have to call that piece of code after a few instructions, I could do that. What would happen in this case? First time when I give a call to this particular function, the control from here will be transferred over here. It will execute the instructions that are there. Again, it will go back. Next time when we call, again it will go here, execute the instructions, again it will come back. Next time we give a call, again it will go here, execute the instruction, again we'll come back. So we have reused this piece of code 3 times. So reusability is something which is very important. We are going to reuse the same piece of code repeatedly, and that is done by calling a function. Yes, Monica, what's the question?
Sir, we need to remember the name of the function.
Your name of the function should be logical. So you want to find length of a list, you say length. You want to find length of a dictionary, you say alien. Same thing you're using every time. So the name of the function itself is meaningful. So there is no question of memorizing. As you go using, you will be aware of those existence of that function. Like you want to find maximum of, yesterday we had used a function called as sum to find sum of the elements inside a list. You said sum. That's a logical name. So rather than remembering the address, which is always very difficult, it's easy for you to remember the name because names are more logical. And we'll be saying this function based on what task it is performing, we'll give a logical name. Just say in string, we had a function called as lower, we had upper, we had capitalize. So that they were very logical. If I'm saying, yeah, is alpha, is digit. So these are names of the function and they make your job so very easy. Just by knowing that once you use that particular function, even if you do not know how that function works, just by looking at the name, you can understand what is it doing. If I say is digit, you will understand, oh, it's checking whether it's digit or not. Is alpha, it's checking alpha beta ya kya hai. If you waste your time looking at the implementation, that would be rather more complex. And if I go beyond that and tell you, check out where it is stored in the memory. That will be all the more complex. Address ko nahi yaad rakhega. So it's always easy to memorize something by the name. Now, I hope you know everybody in this classroom. Monica,
Yes, sir.
you know everybody in this class?
Yes.
Okay, tell me what is Piyush's phone number?
I don't know.
No. Tell me what is Ashish's phone number?
No, sir. I don't know.
किसी का नहीं आ रहा है. But if you have to call Ashish, what will you do?
I'll check my phone and search the number by his name.
You will search the number, you will start dialing the number,
No,
then
search it by his name.
name. So
Yeah.
names are easy to memorize. या आप नाम भी भूल गए बैच में कौन कौन है?
नहीं.
So it's easy to memorize anything by their name. So you'll type the name, what will get the address, key value combination, mapping kind of map. And then you'll dial on the click on the name and the number will get dialed. So it's like a dictionary where you give the key and you'll get the value. So you'll dial the name and you'll get the phone will get connected. So it's always easy for we as humans to memorize names. There are people who also memorize address. Okay, who also memorize address. So that's also possible, but that's very, very critical for anybody to understand. So it's always easy to memorize names and not the addresses. Okay, so it's a easiest way to go ahead. So we'll call it by using the name. Like you'll dial Ashish by not by his number, you'll call it, and you want to connect to him, you'll dial his name. We are already used several functions. We have used function like length, range in for loop, length every time we have been. These are predefined functions. So what are we going to do? I was calling it predefined. We say built-in function. That's already there in Python. So it's built-in function, predefined function. That means not the one that we have created. What we learn today is how to define user-defined function. We are the developer, correct? So we're going to define our own functions. Functions are defined by using def keyword. So this is the keyword that we'll be using to define a function, def keyword. So def keyword doesn't, it's actually just a notation which tells us, okay, this is a name that we're going to give to this piece of code. After this keyword comes an identifier. So if I say def, do this task. So do this task is an identifier. That is the name that we're going to give to piece of code that will follow after that. So after this keyword, after the def keyword, you have an identifier. So I'll say def, do this task. That's the name of the function, followed by a pair of parentheses. So I'll put round brackets, parentheses, which may enclose some names of variables and by a final colon that ends the line. So let's look at the syntax. How does it go ahead? So it says def, the function name, that's an identifier. And then the parentheses, these round brackets, within which I said parameters in square brackets, because parameters are optional. It's not compulsory for you to have parameters. Some functions have it, like some functions don't have it. So there is, like we had seen a function like, which is the function that we had seen which did not have parameters. Did we look into any such function?
Is lower.
Yeah, string dot is lower, correct? We have not been sorry na, each digit with वही था. Okay, sorry. So it may or may not, but length function was taking in parameters. But remember, Ashish, although you identified that function, it was actually not a function, it was a method. It is present inside a class, a function which is present inside a class. It was string dot lower, correct?
Yes.
String dot lower. It's a method. So if a function has been defined within a scope of something, that's a method. So we'll see that differentiation as we go ahead. There is a class called a string, inside which there is a function. So functions that belong inside a class are called as methods. We are going to define functions today, not methods. Now, when I use the word method, that means they're freestanding. You don't require the dot operator to call it something dot function name. No, I'll directly call it length, range, dict. We directly call them. So here I have a function called as say hello. Look at the syntax. Def is a keyword. Say hello is the name of the function. I'm using lower camel case. The first letter of the function name is small. And the next word inside the function name is uppercase. So I'm using camel case, lower camel case, followed by this parenthesis. Inside this parenthesis over here, inside this parenthesis over here, I may have some data. I may not have some data. I may have some values that I may supply over here. I may not have values supplied because that is optional. but then that is followed by colon. ये आपका जो colon दिखाई दे रहा है, ये colon, ये आपका first line हो गया. After the first line, you have an indented block. That means all those lines, instruction which will appear at this level of indentation. So that will form the body of the function. That means this is the piece of code that will get executed when you call this function called as say hello. And how do you specify where the function starts and where it ends? Just by indentation, nothing more than that. So this indented block, whatever comes at this level, after this keyword def, belongs to that particular function. So in Python, this indentation plays a very important role. So def statement creates a function object and assign names to it. Now, what is an object? Now, one thing, if you understand it, you don't understand, but just record it. In Python, everything is an object. Note karke rakho. This is very different as compared to C++ and Java and other languages that we learn. In Python, everything is an object. Even functions are object. I'll provide proof of that as we go ahead. But the better proof will be when I discuss concept of classes, where you learn how to create objects. But as far as Python goes, everything is object. Even functions are objects. Of what type? Function type. So there is a type like string. So you can say there is a type called as function. And so every time we create a function, we'll say it's an object of a function type. So def statement creates a function object and assigns a name to it. So when I say def say hello, so there's an object created and that object has a name called as say hello. And what is that object containing? These statements. Where is identifying this particular statement, print hello, whatever it is. It has general format. I can say def name, that's a identifier. You may have a number of arguments, colon, and then statement. Or at times you may have def name, you may have a number of arguments, colon, number of statements, and at the end return value. That means you may define a function that does some task. You may create a function that performs some task and also returns a value. So functions are like expressions. Means if I say 2 plus 3, 2 plus 3 is an expression. It's an arithmetic expression which will return a value as 5. So if I say x is equal to 2 plus 3, in x what will get stored is value as 5. So if I say x is equal to some function call, it will return some data that will get stored inside the function. Like you have been saying, total is equal to sum of that list. So that sum will carry out addition of all elements inside the list, and the result was returned that we are assigned to a variable called as total. Actually, we said total marks is equal to sum of the list is what we had said. So that was the second design of the function, which returns a value. But it is not a compulsion for a function to return a value. देखो यहाँ कोई return statement नहीं है. Some languages like C, it's compulsory to return a value. In Python, if you don't return value, it returns a special object called as none. That means it's telling us we are not going to return anything. None, N-O-N-E, N capital. A return statement itself is optional. So this return statement itself is optional. So two types of function. These functions performs a task. The second one performs a task and also returns you a value. It will always return a value, not a variable, a value. The function header starts with def, followed by the name of the function, then a comma separated list of parameters. Here, function name and comma separated list of parameters, argument 1, argument 2, argument n, they are separated by comma. Separate list of parameters within the parenthesis and then a colon. देखो ये parenthesis round brackets है, round brackets में comma separated arguments and then a colon. Parameters is a variable. That means what we'll have inside this function are all variables. You'll never have values over here. You'll always have variables. I'll tell you the reason behind it. Say, if I give you a value, if I define a function where I supply a value. Now, actually, when I give a call to a function, I'll be supplying the values that will be caught inside this variable. They'll be assigned to these variables. So the arguments inside this particular function always have to be variables. Parameters have to be variables. You can't have two functions with the same name. Now suppose this was a function name and this is also a function name. In most other language like C, it will generate an error. In C++, if the design of the function was exactly the same, it would again generate an error. You cannot have two identifiers with exactly the same name. In any language, you cannot have two functions with exactly the same name. In Python, you are allowed to have as many number of functions with the same name. Now, what would happen in this class if I had two Harsh? What would happen? Yes. क्या होता हर्ष अगर क्लास में दो हर्ष होते थे
जब तक सरनेम नहीं बोलते तब तक पता नहीं चलता
नहीं,
किससे
हर्षी है,
बोल
उनका सरनेम नहीं दोनों को, तो
कंफ्यूजन होता है कि किससे वो
किसको, आई सेड हर्ष डू दिस फॉर मी, तो दोनों एक दूसरे की तरफ सोचते हैं, एक सोचता है वो एक काम करेगा, दूसरा सोचता है ये काम करेगा. In a classroom, you never have two students with exactly the same roll number. That will only create a confusion as to which student are we referring to. So they have a unique identifier. That's a roll number. And roll number of any students inside a classroom or class will not be exactly the same. And this is the basic logic in all the programming languages. In Python, that's not the case. In Python, if I have defined a function with some name, say foo, and later you define another function with the same name foo, it will suppress the previous function. It will never generate an error. So you have to be at the more careful in Python. That there is a predefined function called as length, len. And if you define len, then the predefined function will not work. It is your function that will come into action. So you have to be extra careful while you are working with Python. In other language, it would generate an error. That is better. In Python, it doesn't generate an error. You are the boss. Since you have created a function, it may assume that your function is more your name, that thing that you have created by your name is that will be given more preference over the predefined functions. So in Python, it would not generate an error. If you define more than one function with exactly the same name, it will suppress the previous function and use only the latest one. So that's where Python functions differ from other languages. You can't have two functions with the same name. It isn't an error, but if you do that, the second function definition replaces the first one. That means the latest one will replace the previous function that is there. Below the function header and indented is a block of statement called as function body. ये देखिए function का header name. First line is the function header. Is a block of statements which is indented from the margin. I told you about indentation. Indentation means the margin that we have leave from the border. ये यहाँ से ये भी सारे statements है, they have been indented from the margin. ये यहाँ से indent कर दिया from margin. So we have this indented code block which is there. That's the function body. That means the piece of code that you would like to execute. Below the function header is an indented is a block of statement called as function body, which must contain at least one statement. And if you do not want to have any statement, you're going to say pass. Remember, there is a concept called as pass. That means if there is a statement which has to be executed, or the syntax demands that there should be a statement, and for any reason you do not plan to write a statement, in such cases we say pass. We say pass. So we could use pass as well. Now let's talk more about these parameters that we are passing. A function can take parameters which are values you supply to the function so that the function can do something utilizing those values. Say, I want to find out square root. So what do? You don't just say math.square root. You say math.square root, sqrt, and you pass a data, something to it, whose square root is to be found. Correct? So let's have a look at it. How do we do it? So suppose this is not there. We are here in Spider. And I want to find square root. So I say import math. I say math.sqrt. It says error. क्या कहता है? Math.square root takes exactly one argument, 0 over given. तो इसमें एक आर्गुमेंट लेना था और आपने एक भी नहीं दिया है, so that's what it is complaining about. So I'll now call the function once again and I pass number like 123 and it is given you square root of 123. It is given you square root. So this is the value that we have supplied. The value that we have supplied over here has been sent across to this particular function called as square root, which has been defined inside a module called as math. Don't bother about it. Sir, आपने कहा था dot है तो method है. Math is not a class. It's a module name. I'll teach you, explain you what a module name is. So math.square root is the function that we are calling, in which we are passing a value. You may say, sir, we may not always pass a value. You may have some variable, say n is equal to 67, and then you say math.square root of n. You may say, sir, ab to maine variable pass kiya. No, you have not passed variable, because in the program, if I anyway say n, you get the value. So here also, when we say n, what will be supplied over here is the value of the variable, that is 67. So while giving a call to a function, it's not possible for us to pass a variable, which in other languages is possible. If you are doing non-C language, then it's possible for you to pass the variable. In Python, it's not possible for us to pass a variable or its address. Only value will get passed.
Akshay.
So we say math dot square root of n. So it's not n that we are passing, it's value of n. And what's the proof? If I say n, I'm not getting n, I'm getting its value. So what effectively gets passed over here is the value of that particular variable. What effectively gets passed over here is the value of the variable. So we got the result. Here we have passed the value. So it may look like variable being passed, it's a value of the variable that gets passed. So if anybody amongst you have done C language, you had concept of call by value and call by reference. So think about it only as call by value. So you can only call it by value, not by reference. But others may just forget, you don't have to have that differentiation when it comes to Python. Because एक ही स्टाइल है, वैल्यू पास कर सकते, वेरिएबल नहीं पास कर सकते आप यहाँ. आपको भले यह लगे कि आप लोग वेरिएबल पास कर रहे हैं n, ना वेरिएबल की वैल्यू पास कीजिए, because anywhere in the program if I say n, I'm getting 67. So here if I say n plus 1, I don't get n plus 1, I get 68, that is 67 plus 1. So n is only an identifier referring to that value. So wherever in the expression I'm using variable name, what is being substituted or there is a value of that variable and so on. So this is the value that we have passed to this particular function that has been defined. But if I'm going to pass a value, can you store a value inside a value? That means if I have a variable n, I can store 89 inside it. But if I had a value 7, can I store 89 inside it? It will generate an error. So values are constant. You cannot store value inside a value. To hold a value, you need a variable. So the point is, when we give a call to a function, here we go. Here I am giving a call to a function. While giving a call, we pass a value, and the value that you pass is actually received inside a function. So यहाँ variable रहेंगे. जहाँ आपने function define किया रहेगा, वहाँ variable रहेंगे. So if I pass 7, that 7 should be received by somebody. It should be received inside a variable. So there are two different terms that we really need to understand. Okay, and let me talk about those two terms now. And you better have that clarity, and it is the same in all the languages. So earlier the better. It says function can take parameters which are values we supply to a function so that the function can do something using those values. So to this function called as math.square-root, I supplied a value that is 67. The square root used that particular value 67 to calculate the square root, and it has returned the result. And I said function names are identifiers. So math.square-root क्या है? देखना है आपको. I could just say print math.sqrt. Note, I'm not writing. It says built-in function है. It's a function. If I say math.sqrt, it's a function. It can take a parameter, some x kind of thing. What that slash means we'll see later. It takes a parameter. So it's a built-in function. Function का name क्या है? तो sqrt है. Where is this sqrt function? It has been stored inside a module called as math. Module is like collection of related functions, like your header files in C++, in which we club together all the related things. Math.h stores all mathematical functions. Likewise, in Python, math module stores all the functions which are related to mathematics. Like you could just check over here by saying dir math, and you'll find all the functions that are stored in math. So we have tau, tan, tanh, sqrt, sin h. I don't remember what ulp is, but then permutation hai, nan hai. There are so many of them. You have GCDB hai, fsum bhi hai. I don't remember what is fsum, but we'll have to check it out. The rest are all what we know. Then there is degrees. Then there is dist. I forgot. We need to check. There are so many different functions which are there. Factorial hai. You don't have to waste your time calculating factorial. So I want to calculate factorial of 71. 71 will be too large. Let's say 7. So I could just say math dot factorial of 7. Let's say so and so. And if I say ID of math dot factorial, here it will tell you the address where that function has been stored. It's an identifier that identifies the location where the code or that function has been stored. It's an object. It's an object. It has been stored somewhere. That's the location where that object has been stored. The function can take parameters, which are values you supply to the function so that the function can do something about it. That means here I've supplied a value. Using this value, the function factorial came into action, calculated the factorial of the number, and it has returned as that value. These parameters are just like variables, except that the values of variables are defined when you call a function and are already assigned values when the function runs. That means when I call this function math.factorial, this 7 that we have passed, or I could have passed a variable n, which is holding value 7, that will now be assigned to the variable that has been defined inside the function factorial. Can we check the function factorial? Let's try and do that. Can we see the definition of function factorial in Python? Let's try and see how they have defined the function factorial. Let's try it. If not, it may be in C language as well. I don't know. So I'll say Python source code. But I'll say I'll go to GitHub. I don't want to unzip the file. So I'll say GitHub. So that takes us to Python programming language. That's a repository where the C Python code is there. And here it comes. I go to Python. There is math. Yes, by math also. It's a C functions. All of them are C language code. That means Python has been included in C language. So let's see some function that has been defined over here. It's a C++ code, C and C++ code both. Suppose there is some function, this has double X and double Y. So likewise, factorial is some function which will take some value. So when you pass this particular value, it will be received inside a variable, double X, double Y. That's a variable in which the value will be received. It will carry out some operations on that and return you some result. It will return you what is the error number. If everything is okay, it will return 0. If something goes wrong, it will return some value, some error code, and so on. So it's look at the implementations in C language. But because we are looking at C Python. Yeah, math module.c. There are 110 lines inside this particular code. ये देखिए मैथ तो GCD का कोड है. ये आपका फंक्शन है GCD वाला. It is taking these parameters. Pass sum, DL sum, multiply. Factorial code. They have explained the algorithm and they are giving the code for factorial, what logic they have applied to find factorial. So we supplied the value that was received over here. You may wonder, "Arey, ज़्यादा क्यों है?" That I'll explain you later what is happening internally. and there's some logic to calculate the factorial of a number and so on. Such a big code. What are they doing? I God knows. Okay, but these are small functions, some functions that they have written. Okay, now there's a function called as math ka factorial. Whatever argument takes, there are some operation it does. Overflow hai kya hai. Otherwise, it returns the value. What is it return result and so on. So these have been written in C language because what we're learning is C Python. But point is, every time you give a call, you pass some values. That values will receive somewhere. Parameters are just like variables, except that the values of these variables are defined when you call a function and are already assigned a value when the function runs. So I call this as parameters. Okay. Or if this is confusing, let's look at a Python function. So I'll call this as parameters. So ये मेरे argument 1, argument 2, argument 3 मेरे parameters हैं. और जो आप pass कर रहे हैं वो आपके arguments हैं. So there is a difference between the term argument and parameters. Parameters are specified within the pair of parentheses in the function definition separated by comma. So the creator of the function specifies, okay, if you supply me some data, say addition of two numbers करना है, तो first value I'll receive in number 1, second value I'll receive in number 2. So those are parameters. And when you give a call to the function, what we supply is arguments. Note the terminologies. The names given in a function definition are called as parameters, whereas the values you supply in the function call are called as arguments. So values that you supply are arguments, and the names that you are given inside the function definition are parameters. Just to understand this, let me just take a small piece of code. Suppose I'm writing a function. Let me define one function, addition of two numbers. So here, I'm just going to say hi there, and I'm going to greet you. I say def, say hello, and I'm going to say name. So whatever name you supply, I'm going to just call that fellow hi. Okay, and I'm going to use f string. Okay, so yeah, return f string literally use करेंगे इसके आगे. I'm going to say hello name, good evening. That's what it is going to return. So I've created a small piece of code. Let me copy this piece of code. Let us run this particular or define it and keep it ready. So such a function has been created. It is there in the memory. What is say hello? Say hello is a function object, and a main key I'll explain later. Say hello is a function which takes a single parameter called as name. ये उसका parameter name है. ये जो name है ये parameter है. But when I give a call, I can just say hello Rahul. तो जो राहुल जो मैं सप्लाई कर रहा हूँ, that's an argument. ये राहुल जो आप यहाँ से सप्लाई करोगे, that will receive inside this variable name, and then you say hello name good evening. That means hello Rahul good evening. Is what will happen. Here we go. So here hello Rahul good evening. It could so happen that I have some variable n in which I have stored Monica, and now if I say hello n, the n is identifier that identifies a name called as Monica. So Monica will be supplied. So this is also a parameter. This is also a parameter. Parameter can be a variable name or parameter can be a literal. But whatever we supply, when I say n, I get its value, correct? When I say I can get its value. So here also we are passing a string letter Monica. Here we are passing Rahul. Whatever we pass while giving this is a call to a function. While giving a call to function is called as argument. ये जो आप यहाँ से pass कर रहे हैं ना, यहाँ receive हो जाएगा. जिस variable में वो receive होगा उसे हम कहेंगे parameter. So while I'm defining a function, the variables the names that we supply inside this parenthesis to receive the values that has been passed are called as parameters in every language. And while giving a call to a function, what we supply, that's a argument. Okay. तो जहाँ function define किया है, the variable names over here will be called as parameters. जहाँ function को call कर रहे हो, वहाँ जो pass कर रहे हैं आप, that's a argument. So argument and parameter. So while giving a call, whatever you pass is an argument. What you pass, जो function के definition में जहाँ उसे receive किया जाएगा, that's a parameter. तो function definition में जो लिखोगे वो parameter. Function call करते समय जो pass करोगे, that's an argument that is there. And then the return statement. a return statement is used to return from the function, break out from the function. Now, this will be best understood if I go ahead writing a piece of code and demonstrating it. So I'll just go through this return statement and then we'll go ahead to the demonstration so that I can actually show you how the control passes and how it returns, how the value is assigned to the parameter that I can demonstrate. We have a debugger. So debugger will help us to debug the code, and step by step, we can actually visualize and see how the things are working. We can optionally return a value from a function as well. Choice, आपके पास return करना है नहीं करना है. Return causes the method to exit and return the control to the caller. So you'll be calling the function from somewhere. तो जहां से कॉल कर रहे हैं उसे कहेंगे हम लोग कॉलिंग रूटीन, जहां से आप फंक्शन को कॉल कर रहे हो. और जिसे कॉल किया गया है वो आपका फंक्शन है, उसे कहेंगे कॉल्ड रूटीन. तो जिसे कॉल कर रहे हैं वो आपका फंक्शन है, दैट्स अ कॉल्ड रूटीन. एंड जो कॉल कर रहा है, जहां से उस फंक्शन को आप कॉल कर रहे हो, दैट्स अ कॉलिंग रूटीन. तो व्हेन द फंक्शन रिटर्न्स, इट रिटर्न्स द कंट्रोल टू द कॉलिंग रूटीन, जहां से उसे कॉल किया गया था. बट कंट्रोल के साथ साथ इट कैन ऑल्सो रिटर्न अ वैल्यू. If you don't have a return statement in your function, the function will return none. None is a special value that indicates this function is not returning anything. So you can just say return, or you can say return expression. When you don't say anything as expression, it will return none. So when we write this def, we are actually creating a function. We are not calling it. After that, def has run, you can call a function, def function in your program by adding parentheses to the function name. So in the last piece of code, यहाँ जो आपने लिखा था ये फंक्शन डेफिनेशन है, और यहाँ जब कॉल करें लाइन नंबर 19 पे या लाइन नंबर 17 पे, यहाँ इसे कॉल करें, यहाँ नहीं कॉल कर रहे, यहाँ तो पैरेंथेसिस मिसिंग है. तो जब ये पैरेंथेसिस दोगे तो आप यहाँ फंक्शन को कॉल कर रहे हो, ये फंक्शन कॉल है. The parenthesis may be optionally contain one or more object argument to be passed assigned to the names in the function header. तो फंक्शन हेडर में ये वेरिएबल नेम है. यहाँ से जो आपने n पास किया उसकी वैल्यू इस नेम में असाइन होगी. यहाँ आपने राहुल पास किया, राहुल was assigned to this variable name, and I'll show you that, don't worry. And then come across positional and keyword arguments. Let's come to this concept of positional and keyword arguments later. Let's look at concept of functions with some basic examples. Important thing over here will be to debug this particular code and check, so that we understand how the functions are being designed. Look at that. कितने concept पढ़ने functions में. Just to see how many examples we are taking. Look at that. It's one of the lengthiest topic that we're going to learn. अभी तो शुरुआत है. Let's talk over here. Watch it very carefully. I am defining a function called as say hello. But I cannot just define and leave it like this. If I define and leave it, it just generates an error. कहता है expected indented block. So it's expecting you to have some indented block here, which you haven't given. So it's generating an error. So if you define a function, here I'm defining a function, creating a new function. It is expecting an indented block to appear somewhere down. And since you have not given it, it's generating an error. So if the syntax demands that there has to be a statement, but you do not plan to give a statement, in such cases, you can just say pass. But by this, the function has not been created. I have to define it. I have to run this piece of code. So if I have to run this piece of code, I could probably select this piece of code. Watch it. I'm selecting this piece of code and I'll run that piece of code. So run selection or current file. I'm not going to run the entire file. I'm just going to run this selection. Before I do that, let me just clear the console. Not just clear the console, also clear. I start with a new console only, so everything gets cleared. Watch it, everybody. And what we'll also do is we'll have this variable explorer over here. So variable explorer ka gaya, automatic import, unblock doc, plain text rich. Just give me a second. View, and we'll go to Windows layout, spider default layout. आ गया आपका वेरिएबल एक्सप्लोरर. देखिए वेरिएबल एक्सप्लोरर आ चुका है and these are different things which are there. Okay, अब बोलो ये कहाँ से आ गया? Don't worry about them. Whatever start with underscore is magical, so don't worry about this magical stuff. Just keep that thing aside. ये देखिए main है. I'll tell you about this name is equal to main क्या है, loader क्या है. So what starts with underscore? For us, it's time to ignore that. That's internally the thing. Now I have selected this line number 11 and 12. Understand very carefully. And I execute that piece of code. So this code has got executed. Moment this code has got executed, see over here, it says it has defined a function called as say hello pass. That function has got defined. It is occupying somewhere like 24 bytes of memory. It is occupying. Okay, it has got created. A function has got created. So there is this function called as say hello that has got created. Can you see this? If I just say dir over here, dir, can you see this function called as say hello has been defined? This is something that we haven't defined. This is something which is predefined. That's okay. But abhi to kuch nahi tha. Or let me just show you once again. Okay, I'm just starting it all over again. If I say dir, open hai, quit hai, whatever I can call over, these are all predefined. There is no function called as say hello. Now, if I select this function and I run this function, ये run नहीं हुआ है. ये function definition, it has been loaded in the memory. Now, moment it has been loaded in the memory, if I say dir, yeah, there is a function called as say hello that has been created in the memory now. If I say, what is this say hello? It says it's a function. I can see its ID. I can just say its ID of say hello. It has been stored somewhere in the memory. Okay. I say dir. Say hello. It says, oh, it also has something inside it. Let's not get into it right now. But then a function has been defined called as say hello. And what is the proof? You can see inside somewhere over here, a function called as say hello has been defined. Can you see? Say hello function has now been defined. It has nothing inside the body. It says pass. Okay. If I call this function, what would happen? Let's see. I call this function by saying say hello, and that's function call. Since we had not passed anything, since that there was no instruction inside, it was just pass. It is not doing anything. Had I said some x is equal to say hello. So what it's like x equal to 2 plus 5. That should give you answer as 7. So let's see what's stored in x. It says nothing. So let's say print x. It says none. So while you did not get to see any value that has been stored in x, what it was actually storing is a value called as none, because this function is not returning anything. Any function that we define which does not return anything returns a special value called as none, just to indicate that function did not return any value. Now, after that, I have a list that has been created. So that's a list that has been created. And there is a function called as min that I'm going to give a call. Like we give a call to this function called as print over here. We give a call to function say hello. So we are calling this function min. It's a predefined function, or it's a built-in function. That's the right word. It's a built-in function called as min. Def min, iterable, and something. Don't be scared. You'll learn this syntax as we go ahead. But this is a predefined function called as min. It is present in file called as builtins.py. ये builtins.py ये सारे built-in function आपको यहाँ दिखा देंगे. Max, map और क्या है? Length, iterable, help, globals, format, the one that we had seen, format. All these predefined functions are available here, written in Python. Okay. Callable, CHR. Okay, that function CHR that we had written. ABS, all नहीं देखा अभी तक हमने. Any नहीं देखा है, ASCII देखा है, bin नहीं देखा है. Okay, so these are all functions which are predefined. Iterator, enumerate dekha humne. All these functions are already defined. So result is going to mean a list. So you can pass any iterable to it. So whatever iterable we pass, it will carry out operation and give the sum of these three elements that will get stored into this variable called as a result. Let's do that and see. So here, inside this list of variables, note कीजिएगा, अभी तक तो हमारे पास there is nothing as a result. Note कीजिएगा, there is nothing as a result. List है. X जो हमने create किया वो है, result नाम की कोई चीज नहीं है. So when I execute this statement, a variable called as result gets created with value is 23. क्या बात है 23? अच्छा 23. क्या बात है? अच्छा minimum find किया मैंने, okay, not sum, minimum है. तो minimum of these three numbers is 23. That's correct. या फिर हम लोग ऐसा लेते हैं 1, 2, 3 and 2, 3, 4. इसमें से minimum क्या है? Let's do that. If I execute this piece of code, minimum value क्या है? तो यहाँ result में देखो यहाँ 23 आ चुका है. Inside this list, there are 3 values. The result is 23. So this function got executed. And actually, when I give a call, control came over here. It executed this particular code. It returned a value, and जो value उसने return किया है, that got stored inside, assigned to this particular variable result. So we'll see that return statement as we go ahead. Now I'm defining a function say hello. It's generating a warning over here. redefinition of unused say hello from line number 11. तो line number 11 पे जो function लिखा है आपने, ये definition उसको override करेगा. That's okay. It will replace this definition or earlier definition. So I have this say hello function, and if I load this function in memory, that means not call but just define this function. So it has now been created. It has these two statements: hello, good evening, and how are you. It's not taking any parameter though. And if I call this function anytime, here let's call this function from this line. यहाँ से call करते हैं. We are at line number 21 from where I'm going to give a call to this function. Let's focus on line number 21. I'm putting a breakpoint, and just for your sake of understanding, I'll debug this code. Watch it. We are at line number 21. I'm calling this function say hello. I said, moment you call a function, control is transferred to the code where that function definition has been given. Watch it. Moment you give a call to the function, control goes to the line number 17. It starts executing the instructions in line number 17, saying hello, good evening, how are you? And after saying how are you, hello, good evening, how are you? Control is returned back. तो यहाँ से control वापस चला जाएगा जहाँ से उस function को call किया गया था. Look at that. So when we give a call to the function, control from line number 21, control jumped to line number 17, executed the instructions, and then the control has come back. Now here I'm defining another function called as say hello. This particular function say hello takes a parameter name which is of type string and returns none. This is called as annotation for a function. Annotation means you're giving information about these parameters, the function return type. So I'm saying this function called as say hello takes a single parameter name which is of type string and it returns nothing. तो ये return type है function का. Function क्या return करने वाला? तो nothing, none. ये name कौन सा type का argument होना चाहिए? तो string type का होना चाहिए. So you're going to pass a name which is going to string, and we say f name, hello, name, good evening, I miss you, so and so. Okay. So I'm saying def hello. So this is the function definition. So we have defined this function. Now I say hello Arjun. Now listen. When I say hello Arjun, Arjun is the argument that is being passed while we are giving a call to this function. So this argument will get passed, that will be received inside this function, inside this variable parameter called as name. तो ये मेरा argument है और ये name मेरा parameter है. ये Arjun will now be assigned to this name. You have to see that there is no such variable called as name till now. Let's see, do we have anything as name? ये list है और result है. Name नाम की कोई चीज आपके पास नहीं है. Watch it very carefully. We are at line number 34 right now, from where I'm giving a call to function. While giving a call, I'm passing this string literal that will be supplied to this argument called as parameter called as name. Watch it. Here we go. And now a new variable called as name has been created, which has value Arjun. That means moment you give a call to the function, the argument is supplied that is acting as the initial value for this particular parameter called as name. Watch it over here. Name ka value file length ka string hai, jisme Arjun has been stored. We haven't passed it, it's automatically assigned. So this value of this argument will get assigned to this particular parameter. And now it will execute the statement saying, hello Arjun, good evening, I miss you Arjun. Okay, आप जिस किसी को मिस कर लिख दीजिएगा. And from there I say nothing. It's not going to return anything. So even then the control will get returned. Control went back. So now I have n is equal to Neha. And I say hello Neha. So here n is not passed. Because if I say n, what we'll get is Neha. Like, आप यहाँ अगर हो, ये n कहा आपने. And if I say n, n का value क्या देखो? Neha है. We're getting this value. It says don't do that while you're debugging the code, don't run something in between. Okay, but I just did that. Here I say hello n. So n ka value Neha hai. Neha will be passed. Control again come to line number 28 because you're calling function say hello. So control will come back to this particular function say hello. N ka value Neha hai, that will be received inside this particular parameter called as name, and that will be used. So whatever values that you supply are passed to that particular function. The function uses that value to carry out some operations. Watch it carefully. I'm giving a call to this function say hello. N is what I'm passing. Control comes to line number 28. The n name now has Neha. Earlier name was having Arjun. अब name में Neha आ चुका है. Because आपने यहाँ से n pass किया, उसका value has been passed. Name में n नहीं आया है. Name के अंदर Neha has got stored, and it says hello Neha, good evening, I miss you Neha. And from here the control will return back. Now I say hello 3.4. Oh, that's wrong. I'm not going to call 3.4 saying good evening 3.4, how are you? I miss you 3.4. But in Python is dynamically typed language. Although you have specified name should be string, it will allow you to call any type of ID because variables in Python are dynamically typed. But this mistake can be very well identified by tools like MyPy, static type checking. So writing this particular thing is not waste of time or efforts. It's very important because when you write a code, something like this, yes, आपने code लिखा, and when you're testing, if you are writing, give a call something like this, which is incorrect call, logically incorrect. And if I pass this code over MyPy, MyPy will immediately tell you line number 38, 39 पे आप कुछ गलत कर रहे हैं because function was expecting string and what you're passing is integer, a floating point value. That's illogical. तो यहाँ आ गए, ये name में देखो 3.4 आ गया है. Python में variables are dynamically typed, but when we had specified we are expecting string, तो validation भी कर सकते हैं. But MyPy जैसा tool है हमारे पास, it will statically check the type whether the expected type and the type of value that you have supplied are they matching or not. Tools like MyPy will immediately identify it. So henceforth, whenever you develop an application, make sure that you pass it through such tools like MyPy, which will do that checking and will let you know, अरे code में कहीं तो आपने गलत call किया है क्या? Those kind of mistakes will be identified even before you run the program. So we give a call. It comes inside. It says, hello 3.4, good evening. I miss you 3.4. That's bad. I say 34. So when I say 34, again it comes here. Name में देखो 34 is received here. Penultimate line पे देखिएगा. It says hello 34, good evening. I miss you 34, and so on. So have you understood this concept that we discussed so far? Quick feedback. What's the matter? क्या doubt है विक्रांत? विक्रांत क्या doubt है? Are you there, Vikrant, in the classroom? Look like he's not there. Let us remove him from the meeting. Vikrant, are you there, or else I'll have to remove you from the meeting? Not there. Let us remove him from the meeting.
सर आपने वो
बोलिए।
माईपाई टूल बताया, आपने वो यूज कैसे किया है?
अब भूल गया
माईपाई
क्या?
टूल जो आपने यूज किया
भूल
सर?
गया? याद नहीं आ रहा है?
नहीं सर.
Okay. We had installed MyPy first. I'll give a demonstration because ये अपने पास है ही एक कोड गलत जो है. इस फाइल का नाम है function1.py. I don't know what more errors we have done, but ये दो लाइन पे पक्का है, हमें मालूम है कि ये गलत कर रहे हैं हम लोग. Correct?
Yes.
So let's go to command prompt and see if MyPy is already installed. If not, we will install MyPy and I'll just run through the tool. It should generate an error for those. Let me see MyPy है क्या? It's not installed. Let me see under Linux में है क्या MyPy installed? It's there. So let's do that. I'll say, I'll actually go to that location saying, go to that location. do static type checking and tell you wherever there is a type mismatch. आ गया? कहता है say hello is already defined, यानी आप redefine कर रहे हो, वो ठीक है. आगे देखते हैं अपना जो लाइन नंबर जो एरर था. Too many arguments to pass to this function say hello. तो एक काम करते हैं, इस say hello का जो previous definition था ना उसे comment out कर लेते हैं. ये जो दो definitions है इन सबको comment out कर लेते हैं for a moment. And we'll use this say hello और यहाँ आप integer pass करें. Let's focus on this case. Line number 28 onwards की बात कर लेते हैं. ये 28 पे डिफाइन किया गया है और यहाँ नीचे कॉल कर रहे हैं लाइन नंबर 38 39 पे कुछ गलत कर रहे हैं. तो लेट्स आस्क फंक्शन 1, लेट्स सी वेदर इट कैन चेक इट आउट. क्या कहता है? say hello has incompatible type float expected string. Line number 38. Line number 39, argument 1 to say hello has incompatible type int expected string. तो it's saying line number 38 पे जो आप कॉल कर रहे हैं, यहाँ जो फंक्शन कॉल करे एक्सपेक्टेड आर्गुमेंट वाज ऑफ टाइप स्ट्रिंग और आपने यहाँ पास किया फ्लोट. लाइन नंबर 39 पे एक्सपेक्टेड आर्गुमेंट वाज ऑफ टाइप स्ट्रिंग और आपने इंटीजर पास किया है. आपने यहाँ इंटीजर पास किया. इट हैज आइडेंटिफाइड दैट एंड रिपोर्टेड टू यू इवन बिफोर यू रन द प्रोग्राम. करेक्ट? देयर आर फ्यू मोर प्लेसेस वेयर देयर आर अदर इश्यूज बट इट हैज करेक्टली आइडेंटिफाइड. कैन यू सी दैट?
Yes.
ये स्टैटिक टाइप चेकिंग है एंड दैट्स अ फैंटास्टिक टूल दैट इज अवेलेबल फॉर अस एज अ डेवलपर. So make use of such tools. Static. Let's do a good Google search. इसके अलावा कुछ है क्या? एक है MyPy. कह रहा है और भी है आपके पास टूल्स? PyType, PyWrite, Pyri. There are so many other tools which are there. A PyType is created by Google, refers to MyType in using interface instead of just typing the script. In other words, the type managing the code flow rather than strictly relying on the type annotation. Okay. Error on the latency whenever it makes the code. If you are operation that works and doesn't contradict any annotation type, it means that पढ़ना पड़ेगा. It's doing something more. यानी Microsoft ने दिया है PyWrite, Google ने दिया है PyType, and originally Dropbox ने डिजाइन किया था MyPy, जो Python का has become the first type checking tool for Python. So that's the one which is very popular. So that came to mind. It worked beyond 212, पुराना है. तो MyType आ गया, PyType आ गया Google से, PyWrite आ गया Microsoft से, Pyri came from Facebook and Instagram. ये type checking and code analysis tool दोनों काम कर रहा है. Okay, so there are multiple tools which are available. I'll just share this link with you and for you to explore more about it. तो मैंने लिंक भी शेयर करके पढ़ लीजिएगा. Additionally, ये क्या कर रहा है. Okay, so there are additional tools which are available. We discussed few of them. But do make sure that you go through that tool. ऐसा ना हो कि सिर्फ मैं लिंक शेयर कर रहा हूँ, एक बार नजर घुमा के रखिएगा तो that kind of requirement arises. Because in this course I'll be using MyPy very often. That's the one that comes to anybody's mind, any Python developer's mind. But looks like Facebook has one, Google has one, Microsoft has one. They are doing something more. So do explore those tools and have understanding. अरे क्या करता है, जब वो जरूरत पड़ेगी तो आप वो भी काम कर सकते हैं. Here we go. So here I am saying import sys, and here ये जो 3.4 pass किया, 3.34 pass किया, that was an error, but that was not identified. So we should do validation. So it comes in a method called as isInstance. Like if I have a variable, let me stop debugging over here. Let us jump to this line. If I have variable n in which I store 56, I want to check whether n is of type integer. So I say is instance of n of type integer? Is that true? N is of type integer. Is n of type integer hai kya? I could directly pass value of is 45 of type integer true. But if I said is 4.5 of type integer, kehta false. Ye nahi hai. If I had some value n and that was suppose name called as Raja or whatever it is, Raja, I said Raja is of type Raja, n is of type integer, kehta false. N is of type string hai kya? True. Now Raja hai na, n में Raja hai. So type of n क्या है? तो ये string है. So I can very well check now. N is of type string, yes. But if I now check is any of the type integer, no, it's not of type integer. So we pass the object and the type name. So if this object or the value is of this type, it returns true, otherwise it returns false. Is instance. So we are expecting a function to receive an argument of type string. तो string के अलावा कुछ पास करोगे तो don't rely just on MyPy. You should also in your program do the validation. So how are we doing validation? Look at this. I say def. As a good programmer, every data that you pass, we should validate the data. I'm expecting name to be of string. The function is not going to do anything, but I'll say good evening. I'll delete that function only if is instance name of type string. यानी आपने जो पास किया वो string type का है क्या? And name is alpha. Rather, I should say name dot strip strip का is alpha करना चाहिए. नहीं तो spaces पाइड अब क्या space is alpha है क्या बोलेगा? तो आपको strip करना चाहिए और is alpha कहना चाहिए. Okay, all characters are alpha. Length तो नहीं है ना? तो I would rather say strip. Strip क्या होता है? उसकी length greater than 0 है क्या और वो alphabets है क्या? is alpha भी से भी चल जाता, but इसमें कोई एक space रहेगा बीच में तो that अगर ये is alpha fail क्यों होगा? Because if I pass name like Rishi space Kapoor, तो space तो alphabet नहीं है ना? It may in that case it will generate an error. तो मैं इसे strip करूंगा. तो कंडीशन अलग देने होंगे. स्ट्रिप करके एंड नेम डॉट स्ट्रिप का लेंथ, इसका लेंथ इस अल्फा से कम नहीं चलेगा क्योंकि अंदर स्पेस आ सकते हैं विच इज वैलिड है ना. शशि स्पेस कपूर, ऋषि स्पेस कपूर चलेगा ना, बीच में स्पेस आ सकते हैं. जस्ट से स्ट्रिप करने के बाद उसका जो लेंथ है, that should not be equal to 0. अगर ये ट्रू है तो ही आगे बढ़ो. तो नेम इज ऑफ टाइप स्ट्रिंग एंड द लेंथ ऑफ नेम डॉट स्ट्रिप नॉट इक्वल टू 0, यानी एम्प्टी स्ट्रिंग नहीं है. इफ इट्स एन एम्प्टी स्ट्रिंग वी जस्ट वांट टू स्टॉप, वी डोंट वांट टू कंटिन्यू फर्दर. अगर एम्प्टी स्ट्रिंग होता है आई शुड से नेम शुड बी अल्फाबेटिक, नॉन एम्प्टी एंड अल्फाबेटिक. Name should be non-empty and alphabetic and error. ऐसा कुछ तो validation कर रहे हैं. तो we have defined a function called as say hello. I mean input sys, because अगर error आ जाता है I could raise an error as well. तो यहाँ sys.str में error भेजेंगे. तो let's define this function and keep it ready. तो मैंने function define किया. Watch it. Now I will be calling this function. I call this function say hello, and I say hello Prithvi. Hello Prithvi, good evening. I miss you Prithvi. If I pass a function saying Raj, ये भी ठीक है. Hi, hello Prithviraj, Prithvi space Raj, वो भी काम करेगा. But suppose if I pass an empty string, the name should be non-empty and alphabetic. ठीक है, अल्फाबेट हमने चेक नहीं किया, but and that's what I'm saying, it should not be. अगर मैं यहाँ 1 2 3 4 पास कर देता है, that उसका भी वैलिडेशन हमें करना चाहिए था. ये क्या हेलो 1 2 3 गुड इवनिंग, बट वो अल्फाबेटिक का हमने अभी तक वैलिडेशन नहीं किया है. ओके, आई मिस यू 1 2 3. शायद आजकल नाम 1 2 3 भी आ जाए, क्या पता. आई टोल्ड यू द वेरी कॉमन नेम इन चाइनीज इज @. तो अगर स्पेशल सिंबल्स नाम बन सकते हैं तो 1 2 3 भी किसी का नाम बन सकता है. लेट्स कीप इट असाइड. आई जस्ट चेंज दिस, शुड बी नॉन एम्प्टी लिख देता हूँ. अल्फाबेटिक का कॉन्सेप्ट निकाल देता हूँ. अल्फाबेटिक का कॉन्सेप्ट निकाल दिया. ओके, so that's a small validation that we have done. let us pass some other type of data. Instance of type string नहीं रहेगा तो यहाँ मैंने डबल कोट्स में स्ट्रिंग पास किया था. अगर मैंने स्ट्रिंग डबल कोट्स में नहीं नंबर पास कर दिया, ये 1 2 3 ऐसे पास करते हैं. It says no, name should be non-empty and alphabetic. Okay, non-empty and alphabetic. Because आप क्या कर रहे हैं, आपने यहाँ नेम पास किया, नेम इज ऑफ टाइप स्ट्रिंग है क्या नहीं, आपने 1 2 3 4 पास किया, ये स्ट्रिंग था बट यार डिजिट्स में पास किया. अगर डिजिट्स पास कर रहे तो एरर है. ओके, नेम शुड बी non-empty and alphabetic. It's an error. So we are doing some validation on the input values. So आप just data, it's like a computer program always works on the principle of garbage in, garbage out. Your logic for the function may be very good, but the wrong data is being supplied to the function. Obviously, the operation that we are doing inside the function will also go wrong. You'll get unexpected result. So it's your duty to check that whether the data that you have supplied to the function is of the correct type or not. If it's of the correct type, only then we should proceed towards performing the operation. Otherwise, you should stop telling the user, you haven't supplied me the right type of data. Say math.square root में अगर आप letters में word pass करने लगे, like look at this, we had imported math. Let me import math once again. And I say math.sqrt, and if I supply 45, that's okay. But if I supply 45 as a string, but so that must be real, not string. That's an error. Type का error है. There is a type error. तो जैसे यहाँ इसने type error generate किया, we could also generate a type error by saying, calling something called as a raise. Okay, we'll learn that. A raise. So I'm raising an exception, telling the system to raise an exception error. ऐसा ये जैसे ये method square root ने कैसे error generate किया सारा, वैसा ही हम लोग कुछ यहाँ generate करना चाहेंगे. तो let us redefine this function and give a call again. पहली बार सही कॉल देते हैं, अगली बार गलत कॉल देते हैं. I say hello. I say hello Kaustubh. कहता है hello Kaustubh, good evening, I miss you Kaustubh. अब Kaustubh की जगह I pass some number. आ गया. Receive, trace back, raise, type error, name should be alphabetic, kind of thing. Okay, so name should be alphabetic, non-empty string and alphabetic. I should say non-empty and alphabetic kind of thing. So अगर आप space भी pass करोगे तो also it will generate an error. Okay, so let's do that. Space अगर pass करते तो क्या होता है? Since I made a change, I'm redefining the function. और इस बार दोबारा call करते say hello को, and I don't supply anything. I pass an empty string. No, name should be non-empty and alphabetic. So such validations are something which is very important. So whatever is the argument parameters that you supplied, input parameters that we supply to the function, before you carry out any operations, make sure that you validate the data. Don't just rely on these annotations that are there. This can only be checked by tools like MyPy, whereas this is something that you can always check when the function is being called. Python on its own doesn't check whether type is correct. You within your code can do input validation. And जो आपके program को आपने input दिया उसका validation करो. And if there's something has gone wrong, you want to stop the function, just say raise and the error. Currently it was type errors or type error. You'll learn more types of error. But till the time I do not tell you more about this raise, you could just print the error. I say print, name should be non-empty and alphabetic, whatever it is. And that's how you could generate an error. And if I'm going to say sys.std so I have to import sys and so on. So that's how we are designing some simple functions. Not like function should take in only one parameter. A function can take in more than one parameters, name one and name two. And I'm going to say if name and name two are besties, ये दो langote hai. So that's a function that we have defined. And I'm going to call say hello. Watch it now. I say hello and I'm going to call Kaustubh. कोई फायदा नहीं है. क्या कहता है? Say hello, missing one required position argument called as name2. That means function is expecting two arguments. आपने एक ही argument pass किया है, Kaustubh नहीं चलेगा. तो suppose Kaustubh एक pass करता हूँ और एक Rahul pass करता हूँ, then it is okay, happy. Together Kaustubh and Rahul are besties. That means not necessary that every function should take in only one parameter. It may have two parameters, but if it has two parameters, you have to supply two values. तो जो वैल्यू पास किया है उन पे वो कोई तो ऑपरेशन करे. दिस फंक्शन बोथ द पैरामीटर्स शुड हैव बीन ऑफ टाइप स्ट्रिंग. आई हैवंट डन द वैलिडेशन दो. इट वाज जस्ट टू डेमोंस्ट्रेट दैट अ फंक्शन कैन टेक इन मोर देन वन पैरामीटर्स and it will return nothing. तो ये कुछ नहीं return करने वाला है. That means if I say result is equal to say hello, Raj and Tom, तो वैल्यूज पास किए, तो इसने राज एंड टॉम और बेस्टिस तो कहा, रिजल्ट में क्या गया है? If I say print, not just result, directly print करके देखो, because the result एक है none. Directly अगर result कहते तो nothing would have been displayed, but अगर print करोगे तो you get to see that value none. Function is not returning any value, but a function may not be returning any value, but it may take in more than one parameters. Both the parameters were of type string, and they are not supposed to return anything. That's none is what's going to return. ये arrow के बाद जो आएगा, that will indicate, this annotation will indicate what is the type of value that the function is returning. Excuse me, I have been using this word annotation, but then sometimes we get confused with the languages. We call this as annotations in Java. Sometimes we tend to forget what we call in Python, probably annotations only. But anyway, it is not something that will change the meaning of the program. It's just giving, it's like a additional notes about that program. It's telling you something more about that particular code. More क्या बता रहा है? वो argument should be of this type. Argument functions we should return something. So it's just giving you some additional notes. It's comments which are a part of a program. Correct? It is supplying some information, some tools like MyPy. So MyPy can check whether that is the case or not the case. Now let's take two functions and stop for today. We have this function called as added that takes in two parameters. They should have been of type integer or something like that, but I haven't specified the type. It returns nothing, but what is the parameter that we supply? It is going to add those two parameters and return the print the result, not return, print the result. Watch it. It's not going to return anything, but print the result. What's the proof? It's not going to return anything. If I say add 8 and if I say 12,34, ये print किया 46. But अगर आप चेक करते हो print x में क्या stored है, तो x में none. It did not return any value. It printed a value. It performed some operation. Functions are called primarily for three reasons. Okay. One is for the side effect. अब side effect क्या होता है? जब आप किसी function को call करते हो, it brings about some change in the environment. In this function when I called, monitor पे कुछ तो print हुआ, addition is 26 or something like that. That was change in the environment. That's side effect. That means something happens because you call the function. Some visible change happens, side effect. Some functions are called for return value. When I say math.square root, no side effect, nothing happens on the screen or the file. It returns a value that gets stored inside a variable. So some functions are called for its return value, and some functions are called for both side effect as well as return value. So this was a function which was called only for its side effect. So when I call this function, there is some visible change. It doesn't return any value. Okay. So three reasons to call a function. First is for the side effect. Second is for the return value, and third is for both side effect as also a return value. तो अभी जो देख रहे हैं हम लोग function, that's only for side effect. Okay, addition का result 46 आ गया, 12 plus 34 is 46. It is printing that particular result. और return क्या किया तो nothing. But then the problem over here is our good part problem. आप जो कहे, I could have called this function added, and instead of passing numbers, I could have passed strings also. That's okay, na? If I say Raj, comma, Kapoor, it says addition result Raj Kapoor. That's also possible. Strings में concatenation operator है ना, so plus concatenated those two parameters, Raj and Kapoor, to print a result as Raj Kapoor. It is still not returning any value. Whereas I have another function called as multiply it, which the first parameter should be of type float, second should be of type float. It will also return value of type float. It carries an operation, no side effect, and returns a value. So let's see. We have this function which is there. I say x is equal to multiply it, and I pass 3.4, 2.3. Nothing, no side effect. कुछ नहीं स्क्रीन पे दिखाई दे रहा है, no side effect. But it has been returned a value. अगर x की वैल्यू देखते हो, तो 7.9, 3.4 into 2.3 का जो result है, that has not been returned. Just to keep it simple, if I say multiply it 4, 2, no side effect. But if I just see the value of x, you'll have value as 8. That's the return value for that particular function. So while multiply, it is called only for its return value, which is assigned to this particular variable. This added was called for its side effect, whereas this one has been called for its return value. So there are 3 reasons. Some functions are called for both. Now here, when I call this particular function, multiply, that's okay. यहाँ मैंने कहा at the rate and 4. So if I call this function at the rate and 4, it will return some value. So what is the value to return? Let's see. So at the rate repeated 4 times because we have learned, कल हमने दिया था line का concept. We said yesterday जब आशीष ने ये line draw किया था, I said अरे ऐसा मत करो, ऐसा एक variable ही create करो जिसमें store करो. ये 80 times dash आ गया. तो अगर आपने multiplied में भी ये पास किया तो वैसे अगर आपने इसमें store किया तो ये print नहीं करेगा. Function is called for its not for its side effect, for its return value. Answer में वो return store हो गया. तो यहाँ भी वो return हुआ था, that got printed. Now I have stored into a variable called as answer. तो अगर मैं answer की value देखता हूँ तो sorry mass नहीं answer ANS answer देखता तो उसमें वो dollar has been multiplied 3 times and so on. So that's the basics about concept of functions. So I just discussed one example, but I tried to explore all the basic concept regarding functions. If there are any questions, please ask. Anybody any questions?
Sir, how did it know how to multiply?
क्या multiply करना है? हमने लिखा है इसलिए मालूम है.
But sir, we did not mention the formula or anything like that.
क्या बात कर रहे हैं?
Just
mention
wrote
किया है
it.
ना, mention किया है ना. जब आपने multiply कहा तो कंट्रोल यहाँ नहीं रहेगा, कंट्रोल यहाँ आएगा, यहाँ आएगा और यहाँ आपने वो जो पैरामीटर्स पास किए उसमें मल्टीप्लाई कर रहे हैं कि नहीं?
Okay, okay. Yes,
तो
sir.
मल्टीप्लाई कोई जादू नहीं है. You have designed that function called as multiply. So when you pass these arguments are received in these parameters, and here is the code that you have given what is to be done. आप मल्टीप्लाई करके उसको डिवाइड भी कर सकते थे. आपने कहा है ये मल्टीप्लाई करो और फिर ये रिजल्ट में स्टोर करो और फिर ये रिजल्ट रिटर्न करो. It is you as a designer of this function, you have performed this operation.
Yes, sir.
Any other question, anybody? Yes, any question? So I'm sharing this example with you. Function 1, just go through this example and there's a small assignment that you are supposed to complete. So note down the question and assignment. Write a function print table. Write a function print table. Do all the validations and everything required. Write a function called as print table. Write a function called print table. Which receives a single parameter of type integer. Which receives a single parameter of type integer. Receives a single parameter of type integer. एक parameter of type integer. Which receives a single parameter of type integer. And prints the multiplication table of that integer parameter up to 10. And prints the multiplication table of that integer up to 10. Means अगर मैंने पैरामीटर 3 पास किया तो 3 1s are 3 से लेके 3 10s are 30 तक प्रिंट करना चाहिए. तो ये फंक्शन सिंपल सा फंक्शन है, आपको डिफाइन करना है. एग्जांपल के लिए आई शेयर द फाइल विद यू. टेक वन मोर असाइनमेंट. This is a function which has been called for its side effect, not for its return value. ये function कोई return नहीं करने वाला है. It is a function called for its side effect. Now a function which is called for its return value. Right, huh? Write a function sum of digits. Write a function sum of digits. which accepts a single parameter of type integer. And annotation सारे use करो ना, या वो colon, str, none, वो जो भी है, which accepts a single parameter of type integer. Do validations as well, which accepts a single parameter type integer and returns sum of its digits. And returns sum of its digits. So for practice purpose, these two functions are good enough. Go through the file that I've shared with you. Go through the notes that we have just now discussed and be ready for tomorrow's session, wherein we'll explore something more advanced. As you discussed, that was basic introduction to concept of function. I hope you understood the purpose of going in with this particular topic. Tomorrow when we meet, we'll take up several more examples. And ये जो file example लिया मैंने ना, that's जो file मैंने आपके साथ share किया अभी, that was only to understand the concept. Listen to me very carefully. If you are writing a program, a script in which there are functions, तो ऐसा वाला लिखोगे तो that's a poor style. ये बकवास है. Function सही था, but program का organization सही नहीं है. So tomorrow I'll show you how to create a module. Module is collections of functions in one file. So वो जो file होता है जिसमें functions रखते हैं उसे हम लोग module कहते हैं. तो how to create a proper module in Python is so that reusable. अब जो अपने function लिखे हैं ना, इसके अंदर जो functions है वो शायद ही हम लोग किसी दूसरे file में use करेंगे, दूसरे प्रोग्राम में. मैंने लिखा और आप यूज करना चाहते हो, कॉपी पेस्ट करने के अलावा आपके पास कोई चॉइस नहीं है. When you design a function, function should be designed such that if I write it, it is not just me who will be in a position to use it, my colleagues should also be in a position to use it. So how to write a reusable piece of code which can be shared across multiple files. Mark my word, multiple files. उसी फाइल में 2 बार नहीं, आपको सर मैंने edit को 3 बार कॉल किया था, that's within the same file. But we should be in a position to share the function between multiple files. So how to organize the code? और ये जो आपने मैजिकल नेम में एक डंडर नेम डंडर देखा था, इज इक्वल टू मेन, या फंक्शन का नाम जब हम लोग प्रिंट कर रहे थे, इट वाज सेइंग मेन डॉट फंक्शन नेम. तो व्हाट इज दैट मेन, उसका पर्पस क्या है, दैट इज व्हाट आई विल बी डिस्कसिंग. सो टुमारोज कोड विल लाइक आई मे डिस्कस 1 or 2 functions, but how to design the application, a simple program which contains functions will be our topic for discussion tomorrow. And plus we'll talk about those positional arguments and keyword arguments. हमने कभी किसी previous topic में देखा था keyword arguments and positional arguments, some topic we had seen. But how do we create a function which takes in positional and keyword arguments? That's what we'll see tomorrow when we meet. So with that note, we'll stop here today. See you tomorrow. Take care. Love you all. Bye-bye.